Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Oscar Hernandez. I am a community organizer with Houton Action, and thank you so much for joining us today. We will be going over our volunteer training on how to assist people through completing the census through our phone banking training. So on this call, what we currently have, it's me as a community organizer, Mario Salinas, who I think many of you might already know from our previous training. And we have help from Tanya, who is also on the call. So if there's any questions or any thoughts, feel free to jump in and to ask either of us any concerns you want to bring up. And then for our check-in question today, we're going to use the chat portion to talk about it some more. If you want to write your name, your pronouns, and then our check-in question is, what is your favorite volunteer experience? So you might have to excuse my pup. Sorry about that. So for checking questions, feel free to use the chat portion. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mario. For everybody else, feel free to use the chat portion so we can review some of this. And I know some of y'all know each other, but it'd be good for some of our staff to also get to know you. Thank you, Arlene. And oh, Super Bowl, that sounds really fun. Okay, as people come in, we'll make sure to catch them up with what we're covering today. But for today's agenda, we'll be covering the following. So we want to reintroduce you to Action a little bit about the work we do, although I know some of you might be familiar with us. Also, we'll be going over the guidelines and how to support people filling out the census. And then using a secondary phone number. We won't get too much into detail as we might have talked about it before, and also because there's a video that we'll be able to share with you all post-training. Then we'll go into the open virtual phone bank. So when you do see open VPB, it's referencing the open virtual phone bank. And then we're going to be talking about our metrics and our goals and how do we build off of that together. So first off, we are Houton in Action. Through Houton in Action, we always start our role or work with our working principles. And these are just some of the working principles we have, as well as our community agreements. But for today, the working principle I want to focus on is equity and systems level change, which means maintaining and focus on equity and achieving a systems level change. And I think through us participating and volunteering or calling people to fill out the census is how we pick up. Where sometimes as community leaders, as people who are involved with the community, it ends up on us to make sure that our communities get counted. So even though the census is out there trying to do the work, we know that there's still a lot more work to be done in communities of color to make sure that people get counted to the census and get the resources that we need. So for us, this is our way to stepping in for a systems level change, more of equity into getting the community involved and participating. We come from different 50 plus nonprofit organizations. Our role in membership has always been to include our organizations, so either from structured nonprofit or individuals who are looking to start a group and then figuring out the best ways to support and work with those groups. But we've been fortunate enough to have relationships with different nonprofit organizations across the greater Houston area and Harris County. Part of our work and how we got to where we are today is that as y'all are aware, after COVID, it's made work substantially more difficult for everyone in the community and how to participate. It's also made work a lot more difficult for the Census Bureau and how they are ensuring that the community is responding to the census. And through this, we connected with the Census Bureau and our local community liaison here, Ana Redondo, who's an amazing person. And we developed a training, which Mario is going to link in the chat if y'all want to check it out. The training happened on April 28th on the Yes to Census Communities Respond Updates and Training. And we're going to be covering some of the guidelines that she brought forth and best practices of implementing these efforts. This training, we had January advisors, Civis, the Census Bureau, and ourselves going through the process of how we're going to support people filling out the census. We also started our Communities Respond campaign, which helped us work on different areas across the Greater Houston area, and within Harris County, and how we prioritize the most undercounted communities to make sure they get reached out to. And we want to ensure that that even though they have pushed the enumerators to go out to a different date, and even though the Census Bureau has been trying to figure out how to get people engaged, we as Houston in Action have set a plan. And please visit, Mario will share the link to on HoustonAction.org/communities response, so you can see all the areas in which we'll be covering, and those are specific areas which you will be making calls in for these phone banking as well. To that note, the guidelines that the Census Bureau put out for us, just so you know, initially they had said that only a census employee or has the ability legally to help people fill out the census application. The census survey. There was a shift in tactics, and this mainly happened because COVID, but this also happened because we were fortunate enough in Houston to have a lot of different nonprofits who are supporting our efforts, who are trusted by the community. They can help people fill it out. But there are guidelines we want to make sure that we are all following. So one of the general guidelines is identify that you are not a sworn employee of the Census Bureau. Volunteers are not bound by the confidentiality standards afforded by law. So by that, what we mean is that a Census Bureau officer is sworn by law that they will not take the information that they're collecting for census purposes. So if they do, they can get fined for misusing that, and possibly get penalized by some jail time for stealing this information. So what we, as volunteers, we are not members of the Census Bureau, which also means that people have to be comfortable working with us and giving out this information, and that we are aware about the confidentiality that it's happening, that we are not taking this information and misusing it in any way. Another thing is and we're going to go through the census questionnaire as well, but through this process of answering the census, we will also make sure that we read the questions as they are written in the census. No matter our political viewpoints or ideas about ethnicity, gender, race, we are not allowed to sway the caller to respond one way or another. We can inform them as best as we can, but they have to make the decision. And as we will be supporting people through phone banking, we will be answering the census on our laptops while we speak to them over the phone, which means that we would write down their responses as they were told to us. We don't want you to, no one on the call should be answering someone else's questions. If the caller does not have an answer to a specific question, even if you feel like you know the answer, it's not up to you to answer it for them. The caller has to answer the questions, otherwise you must skip it. Because the census is about self-identification. So by that, what we mean is that we're helping people respond to the census. What we are is basically the vessel that inputs that information on the census survey, and then sends them out their information as well. Now, once the census form is completed, you will receive a confirmation number. This confirmation number is not intended for you to keep it. This confirmation number is intended to be sent to the caller you're supporting. So whether that be taking a photo of it on the computer with your phone, if they don't have an email, you can text it to them that way, or maybe it's downloading the PDF and emailing to them directly. But once that is sent out, you should delete that from your phone. You should delete that from the computer. And if they don't want you to text it to them, or they don't want you to email them, you can give it to them over the phone and ask them to write it down. That phone number is important because it's a confirmation that their census was filled out, and it goes directly to the information they input in the system when they're responding to the census. So remember, we want to document as much as we can. And when we get to the phone banking portion of this training, we will be reviewing some other questions that we are asking that do not pertain to the census, but that we want to make sure that we're tracking the efforts that we're doing. A quick recap too, that the census is not asking social security numbers, citizenship status, bank account information, money or donation, anything on behalf of a political party, or any bank or credit card account number. This is important for us to note, not only as folks who are calling people to respond to the census, but Houston is leading, unfortunately, in fraud when it comes to services in the community, specifically when it comes to communities of color. I can share that from my experience. When I've worked with immigrant communities, I've seen countless of people charging people for things that they shouldn't be charged for. Some of you might be aware of TASFA or FAFSA. TASFA is in-state tuition. These documents are completely free. You can download them, and also depending on the schools. I've seen organizations or people, better yet, charge for printing out that TASFA application, and the community is sometimes unaware of this and end up paying money for something they can get for free. You can get the survey questionnaire online. It is completely free. No one should be charging people to print these documents, but these are things that we will see happen. And our role is to inform the community and let them know the options that they have and that they don't have to go that route. We want to make sure that the expectations are clear of what we're trying to talk about, how the census affects the community. We also have a history of the census, which I strongly recommend you all to read through it. It's something that came through City Lab that talks about how the census came to be, and then why is it that marginalized and undercounted communities even exist, and then the intentions behind that, and not actually counting everyone through the census, and the effects that has by not funding properly our communities. And Mario will share the link on the chat as well. But through the census script, you will also get reminders of why the census is important, how this affects congressional districts, state legislative districts, voting precincts, school districts. It affects people's schools, roads, any infrastructure, as well as understanding a question that might come up around the stimulus check. This has nothing to do with the stimulus check. This is to count people who are in the country, regardless of their immigrant status. This should not impact any other government benefits. But what I mean by it does not impact the benefits is that you shouldn't be denied any benefits because you responded to the census. However, if you do not respond to the census, it does cause a 10-year streak of how much funding goes into those benefits. And that's why it's important, especially for people who need these benefits, to respond to the census. There's a lot of information here, and Mario will put these in the chat portion as well. So if you do get response or questions from people, like if someone just says, I know what, I'd rather fill it out myself, where do I go? My2020census.gov is where we're sending everybody. Everyone, a quick question into the space. Have you all filled out your census yet? Yes? I see a lot of yes. Okay, awesome. And as you will know, in order to fill out the census, you can fill it out on the website or do it on paper. And there is there's an online ID code, but it is not necessary for people to, in order for people to fill out the census. If you do not have the code that was mailed to you, or just if the code never got to you, there's a way around it by answering a few of the questions that are in the beginning portion of the census. The site is available in 13 languages. There's 59 language guides available to download, and up to 9 persons can enter per household. But you might be able to do a lot more with the online form. And if you cannot enter everyone from the online form, you can always call the Census Bureau, and they'll be able to support your. You can call the Census Bureau, and they'll be able to add more people if that's needed. Now, there is over 11 languages where people can call in based on their native tongue. It does not cover every language, and be aware that the Census Bureau is also has been underfunded. So that means that even through COVID, they might not have be able to respond to everybody at the moment. And we have a hotline where people can also call if they need support to that end. There is a paper questionnaire. Like I mentioned, this should be going to people's houses, but if people are not filling out the questionnaire, then doing it online is probably the quickest and fastest way to do it out. So the census also shift its timeline, where before it was due to end at the end of June. Now it's pushed all the way to the end of October. So we still have to, from now to the end of October, to actually fill out the census. This could be tricky when talking to community, because we need folks to understand that there is an urgency for them to respond to the census, as well as give the rightful knowledge that they still have to the end of October. But we don't want people to think that, oh, I can wait to do it later. We would like for them to do it as soon as possible so they can get all this information. When it comes to questions about ethnicity and race, this can be very difficult on how to answer the census. We will see when we review the questions through the ethnicity and race, how we can help people identify themselves so they can respond to it. There are multiple ways and people can do that, and they do accept questions when it comes to multiple responses to the questions about ethnicity and race. And Mario can add the OMB PDF here, so y'all can get that information of what it looks like and how they measure the standards of race. All this being said, race is like, for what my friends always say, a social construct. So understanding that this is like self-identifiable about how people identify themselves, not only based on the color of their skin, but their culture, their nationality. This all takes a different tone on how people want to respond to this question. So our role is to be able to answer them of what they mean by these terms, but also allowing them to self-identify as who they are, and then being able to implement that into the system. Before we practice, because there is a really cool website that we can actually practice filling out the census, and Mario will also add that into the chat portion. There are questions in here that if you have any confusions, you don't know how to respond, my suggestion is to unmute yourself really quick, and then we can cover it together. So this is but a practice website to how to fill out the census. I've done this a couple of times. We did a video, it took us about an hour, but that's because we were goofing around and trying to figure out the best way to answer these. But when I filled out my census, there's only 2 of us in my house, so it took us about 4 minutes. But I've practiced this video a couple of times, and I can go really fast through it, but I'd much rather answer any questions or concerns or thoughts y'all have. So because this is a practice, nothing that's filled out through here will be sent into the Bureau. And because this is a practice, it's going to look slightly different, but it's almost identical to what the real website looks like. One of the big things to note, and you can play with this as you see fit if you ever get lost, is these red question marks. So these are important texts that can help you guide through the process of what we're looking at. So if you don't know like how to answer a question, this will help you guide through there, as well as the video that we're covering today. So we want folks start questionnaire. It's the first thing to do. Now it's gonna ask you for your code, which is 12-digit codes. This is again the code that people should have gotten in the mail. But if you don't have a census code, then you can always just click here. Now, because this is a practice, it's not gonna take us to the next place, but it will ask leading questions about your name, your address, and information about identifiable information about you, so they know that it's you so they know who is answering the census. As a caller, this is not your information. I'm sorry, as an operator, this is not your information. This is the caller's information. So who you're talking to, you're going to be asking this information. So if they don't have the code, you'll be able to ask them for the address, the name, and whatever other identifiable information that's necessary. From there, you can click next. This is like filled out for us, so we don't go through the process, but as you see here, this is the address for the caller, and we're just gonna click yes to confirm that that is the correct address, and then we'll press next. On April 12th, on April 1st, 2020, will you be living or staying at 105 Beach Road? Again, this is a test address, it's not the real address, but this would be where is the person living on April 1st. Because all census responses are tracked into April 1st, what they want to know is if this is your current address. Before April 1st, this would be thinking about in the future, where you'll be living there by April 1st and moving forward, but we can think about it today. So on April 1st, will you be living here? If that's where they live, then yes. and that should be where they live if that's the address they gave you. From there, it goes to first name, middle name, last name, and telephone number. So I'm gonna put an alias right here. So this is like a first name, middle name, last name, and then there's a phone number if we want to make sure we can cover the person's phone number. Now, the Bureau typically does not call people for any questions. This is only for emergencies. But whenever the Bureau does call somebody, it will not be to ask the census questions. That is to say that the Census Bureau is not calling people one by one, asking them about all the census survey questions. If people want to fill out the census questionnaire, they have to call the Bureau themselves. Then there you would press next, including yourself. How many people will be living or staying in 105 Beach Road on April 1st? Now, depending on how many people this is it's ultimately gonna identify how much time you're gonna stay on this. For the sake of time, I'm just gonna put one person and then go to the next. Now, if I would have put two or more, this practice session only allows us to track two, but I would have said the names of people listed below, we could add them here. So what is the name of each person who will be living and staying in 105 Beach Road on April 1st? If we chose to add a person, we could, and it would be underneath that, and we would check everybody who lives in that household. And then from there, it says we do not want to miss any people who might be staying on 105 Beach Road, for example, children related to or unrelated, such as newborn babies, grandchildren, foster. So this is a very, very important example. If there is a baby who was recently born, and it asks about this question, about how many people live in this house, that baby will also be counted. When it asks questions about age, if that baby was recently born, then it would be 0 in terms of years, and then in terms of month, it would be the specific amount of months that that baby's been alive. And this is extremely important too, because children under the age of 5 historically go undercounted, which means that programs for young children get underfunded. So we want to make sure that all the children are counted. If you have any other relatives, like I've had that uncle who comes over to the house to stay over for like 2 weeks, and then 3 years later, he's still living with us. And that tends to happen in many communities. So ensuring that we count anyone who's couch surfing, who's staying in the house, technically they're living there, even if they're not paying for all the rent and all that stuff. They still live there, so we want to make sure that they're counted. Roommates, other relatives or non-relatives, people without payment, a permanent place to live. So all of these count into that one specific address. So anyone who's in the household, even if they don't count as the immediate family, if they have uncles, nephews, and other people living in there, they should be able to, they should be counted through the census. After you answer that, it says on April 1st, 2020, will the household, apartment, or mobile home at 105 Beach Road be? So this is also to understand if you own a house or if you're a renter, and then also understanding if, like it says, occupied without payment. Sometimes you have people who live in a house or who are filling out the census who are not paying anything for it, so that they might be living in a house that they don't get charged rent for. They also might have special programs that might be able to support them through the payment of the rent. So all this is captured into the questions. Owned by you or someone in the household, free and clear. So this is the difference of whether there is a mortgage on it or if you own the house. So if this person that we put in here owns the house, well, the vast majority of people are renters. So let's mark him as a renter. And go to the next question. Of the people who will be living in 105 Beach Road, who will own the house, apartment, or mobile home on April 1st, 2020? So if I would have put in 5 or 6 people, you would have had a long list here of people who are in that house. And then you would have to choose who owns that house. So because this is the person, this person is renting, then I'm gonna click on none of the above because this person is renting. So that concludes the household questions. As you can see, some of it is fairly simple. It doesn't really require a lot. It just want to know whether you're owning the house or not. Now we're going into the people questions, and then where it specifies and who's the person answering. So what is Elvis' sex? So unfortunately, even though as an organization, we do recognize all of our LGBTQ community, and we want to support any efforts in how they're moving forward and how we can support their existence. But for the sake of the census, it only counts male or female, and only male or female as in the recognition of who they are from their birth. So if someone does not count as male or female, they might be inclined to skip this. That is totally their choice. But know that if they do skip this answer, like many things within the Census Bureau will identify it for you. So we want to give people the opportunity for them to answer this as best as they can and based on how comfortable they are. And then we will go to, didn't pick one. Next. What is Elvis's date of birth? So I'm gonna just put January 1st, New Year baby, 1990. Now, if this were the real questionnaire, it actually fills out this automatically. It does the math for you. But because we're doing a practice one, we'll put 30. And this is, again, if there was a young child who was born just within the month, you could actually write the month, the day they were born, and you could put how many years, 0, because they only have 2 or 3 months. Next. Is Elvis Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin? So this is another question that places a lot of confusion to people because it goes into the difference between ethnicity and race. As we're all aware, Mexicans are not the only Latino community, and Mexicans are also not only covered based on brown people. There is a lot of Black, Asian, white, and it's a big scope of folks. And I know that one of my friends used to say that even though his mother's from El Salvador and his dad's from Puerto Rico, he came to Texas to be a Mexican. And we want to make sure we recognize people based on who they are. So based on that, there's also people who identify as Hispanic, Latino, or maybe identify more through a Spanish origin. There's people who might identify as Mexican, Mexican-American, or Chicano. And that can also bring a whole list of dialogues, right? Trying to figure out what's the difference or how they are similar, but that's also why the person is self-identifying. You can see Puerto Rico, even though it is part of the United States, is still put in here as part of the region and as a Spanish question, Cuban, and then other Hispanic or Latino origins. So if this Elvis was a different Hispanic or Latino origin, and we wanna put, let's just say, Salvadorian, we can put next, and then that person can identify that they're from El Salvador. Now, this is also where it comes into the question of race. So the first one is white, the second one is Black or African American, followed by American Indian, or Alaskan Native, Chinese, Filipino, Asian Indian, Vietnamese, Korean, Japanese, other Asian, the Native Hawaiian, Samoan, Chamorro, Pacific Islander, and then some other race. So someone who might identify, who have mixed parents, they might be able to click white and Black, and then specify there on what they mean. If somebody does not identify with any of these ethnicities, they can click on some other race and write down the specific race or origin. One thing to note, again, if someone says, I'm some other race, I don't see that, they do need to give us input in what race or ethnicity they identify as, because if they do not, then the Census Bureau will pick one for them. So it is important for them to be able to self-identify in what a race they feel comfortable with or how they identify. And it's important to understand this because the demographics are changing a lot in the country. The Census Bureau anticipates that for the first time, if there is a complete count, more than 50% of the responses will be clicking this some other race portion of it. Because of there's a lot of different ethnicities and people who are biracial as well, they might be able to pick out different ones. And honestly, even when people say, well, why does white have other portions of it based on country? There is, like I mentioned, different not just nationalities and culture when it comes to race. So as you see here, like Egyptian is one of the responses here. And this is like even the point of contention to some people, especially as we will be starting calls in Southwest. There are some people who are from Arabic communities that are expected to mark white, even though they're Arabic. And they're, a friend of mine always say, why do they want me to mark white if I'm not treated as I'm a white person? And one of the things she recognizes, like, how do we make sure that we're tracked as who we are? So they might be more comfortable versus the white to write into the other portion here. But you also might get someone who's like English or Italian, and then they can specify what they feel like here, and we write that in there. So I'm gonna put other for the origin, and well, let's make it, because I wrote Salvadorian in the other one. We can keep it into, and this is true specifically for many indigenous communities who are from South and Central America, who might be brown but don't necessarily identify with Hispanic or Latino. They might need recognition of who they are. So this one, Purquiche. I'm pretty sure I misspelled that, but in putting that, just to support people to recognize who they are. So once we identify that identifier marking as a person, we can get to the final questions. Before I go to the final question, I will say that exactly what we did for Elvis here, we would have to do that repeatedly for all of them. So we would ask for the date of birth, their age, ethnicity, are they Hispanic or Latino, and then going through that process. It's done over and over based on how many people live in that household. So for the final question, it says, we would like to make sure that everyone is only counted once. Some people live and stay more in one place at one time. Now, this isn't true, and the attempts of counting people only once is extremely important. However, I will say that there has been multiple cases of, throughout the years, there's been a lot of counting people more than once or overcounting. This sometimes happens if parents are divorced and their children get counted in either household. It can get really tricky when it comes to that because it depends on the parent and how they want and where they want to count the child. It also depends on their relationship, right, to make sure that that child gets counted. Also, for people who are attending college, they might live with their parents, but they spend most of the time on campus, and there might be a lot of confusion about that. I don't think it's a good thing, but I would say thanks to COVID, I don't know if we're going to have that issue in terms of people calling us because a lot of campuses have closed down. But that's also something to consider as we're answering these questions. For people in nursing homes, or institutions like prisons or detention centers, those institutions will count everyone who's in their institutions. So it's different for them. And if you have a family member who is in one of those institutions, then they would have to, and then even if you fill it out here, you will select where they are. So do any of the following people usually live or stay somewhere else beside this house? So if I were to say yes, this will take us to where do they live? Do they attend college? Are they in military? Do they move somewhere else to be closer to the job? And you will select this and it'll take you to the final question. But I'm gonna pretend, because such is the case, that most people will always live in the house in which they're living in, we'll just put that none of the above are living outside of their outside of the house or in other quarters. And then that just goes into the final question, submit the questionnaire. It gives you an opportunity to edit the questionnaire, but you might not need to do that at all. So once you click submit questionnaire, this is gonna help, this is gonna process you to the last portion. So right here is the confirmation number. So here's where the important thing to take a screenshot of them. If you're supporting someone filling out the census, you will ask them how do they want to receive the confirmation, whether it's a screenshot or with your phone to text it to them, email them, or they say, please don't send me anything, just tell me what the confirmation number is, you can give it to them. If you do take a screenshot, if you do download the PDF, please delete that from the system. That is a requirement as a volunteer, as we do not want to keep anyone else's personal information. Through here, at the bottom, it says show sample results. This will look what the results will look like, where you could be able to print this out. Results, print it out, we'll cancel. So, and then that concludes basically the process of the entire census, filling out the form. It's a pretty simple process. If you ever get lost or want to review what it looks like, Mario will share the practice of filling out the census thing one more time, link again, and you can by all means practice that so you can make sure that you're caught up. And if you have any questions or concerns, you'll be able to fill it out that way. So back to our presentation. Now that we have an understanding of where the support of the Bureau is, and that we also practice filling out the census, we want to go through how is this phone banking going to work, and how are we going to support you in your efforts, and most importantly, how are you supporting the community to make sure that the census is filled out and that everybody is counted. The first thing we want to cover is around calling from your phone. And what that looks like. So we are currently using a system called EveryAction. EveryAction is not a phone system. It's a phone banking system that we use for data. It's on your laptop. You can access it through your phone, but it's not, you cannot make phone calls through EveryAction. So you have an option. If you want to use your phone, you can. We don't necessarily recommend people using their personal phone to make these calls. An option that folks could do is you could check out any of the apps that exist for this. One of the simplest apps that is out there is Google Voice, which links directly to your email. Opening a Google Voice, Tanya and Mario, they could share the link of a video. It's a 10-minute video that'll tell you how to download and open Google Voice. The good thing about Google Voice is that you can actually talk to people via your laptop. So you could just make a call through your laptop and then text people through your laptop, and you can hear voicemail through your laptop as well. So it's a pretty simple system that is used as is attached to your email. Google Voice will ask you for your phone number. That's so it's attached to the email that's connected to. But whenever you make a call through Google Voice, the Google Voice number is what's going to show up. DialPad is another app, but it's free for, I think, about 2 weeks where you can test the system, but it does eventually have a cost. And we know that there's a number of different systems out there. But if someone, if you are using your phone and someone does call you back, we ask that everyone send them to our hotline number, which is 281-305-8300. And Mario, if you can add that in the chat portion too. Because because the extent of your support for these phone banking is to call the community, ask them about the census, and then help them fill out the information. But you do not expect to do follow-up calls. If they get lost or have any questions, please send them to our hotline, as we have other operators who are making sure that they can get the help that they need. Now we're jumping into the Open Virtual Phone Bank. So you're going to see the Open VPB a number of times to this. That just simply means Open Virtual Phone Bank. Now this process is extremely simple. We have developed a script that's going to help you through the Open Virtual Phone Bank. All you have to do is follow the script. But by that, I don't mean verbatim. You're not a robot. We get it. Everyone here is people. As volunteers, I love volunteering, and I've never met a grumpy volunteer. Well, at least not early on in the morning. Later on, it's a whole other story. But usually everyone who volunteers have a great attitude, great personality, and they like talking to people. So please don't be a robot. Follow the script so you don't get lost, but be yourself. Talk to people. Let them know that we're going to review the census questionnaire. And also, for your sake, if you get confused or lost, like, just practice. Use that link that we shared about practicing. Go through the questions yourself, so that way when you talk to them, you'll be a lot more comfortable because you already know what's coming. And if someone asks you for questions that you don't know, I know it says look to 2020 census.gov, but honestly, if someone asks you a question that you don't know, the appropriate response to that is say, I don't know. Okay, and if you get lost, again, send them to the hotline. You do not have to answer questions you don't know, and if you don't know, I highly recommend, or we're asking you to please do not answer questions that you do not know the answer to. But sending them to 2020census.gov could help them figure out the answers to the questions they have, and even sending them to the hotline will support that. This does not happen a lot, but if someone isn't interested and they start to argue with what's going on, or with their why you're calling them, or how you got their information, just thank them and hang up. It's totally fine. Say, How we receive their information is actually through the county, because we are working with the city and the county. So you, as a volunteer of Houston in Action, with our Yes to Census campaign and our Communities Response campaign, we are supporting people filling out the census application. So if anyone asks, like, why do you get my phone number? You say, I'm a volunteer of Houston in Action. Houston Action has a campaign with the county and the city, making sure that everybody gets counted. But if someone is really upset, which again rarely happens, just say thank you, have a good day, and you can just hang up. If you do not have to sit there, you do not have to listen to everything they have to say, because just as sometimes it can be upsetting listening to people who are mad, it could also take a lot of time when somebody wants to tell you their life story over the phone and they just met you. So we want to be polite as possible, be courteous as possible, but if you feel like, oh, this is crossing a line, I'm a little uncomfortable, just say thank you, I have to hang up, and you can hang up. A big recommendation is find a quiet space, like I was trying to do, because my pup likes to bark at the most inappropriate spaces. One time he was actually snoring under my desk while I was trying to make a call. So knowing that your place is quiet, knowing that you're not going to get interrupted is going to make everything a lot easier for you. Please don't go to coffee shops or restaurants and try to do this. One, COVID is out there. Two, we don't want other people hearing these information as you're asking these questions, and other people can take this from you. So please be mindful of your space, be mindful of your surroundings, make sure you're comfortable, and make sure someone else who you don't know can't overhear what you're sharing and take some of this information. Now, one thing to keep in mind too is that a lot of people will not answer their phones. Don't feel bad about this, it's not you. This is something that happens a lot because we're blind calling all these different places. And so as you make a lot of phone calls, actually a very low percentage of people will be able to answer the calls, and even out of those who answer, there's a lower percentage that will actually stay on the call with you. Know that we have thousands of phone numbers, so phone numbers we will not run out of. So as you're comfortable, whenever you catch a break, you want to make some phone calls, you can do that. And if no one picks up, you might get maybe 2 calls to pick up out of 10. That's totally normal. If you have an opportunity to leave a voicemail, please leave a voicemail. That voicemail is part of our script, and we'll ask them to call our hotline, and they can just call through our hotline and get any information that we need through there. Always ask the person for a list by the name, but you can accept the person. So by this, what we mean is if you're calling somebody, you ask for the person who's on your call, but if they say, oh, my husband's not home, I'm like, okay, well, if you live there with them, and ask them if they want to take the census, because it only takes 1 person per household to fill out the census. Okay, so 1 person can do it. And this is true for especially immigrant communities where you might speak to an adult, but then they might pass the phone to their children to be like, what is this person saying? And the child might be the one more comfortable responding and answering questions. However, we do not want to spend a lot of times talking to young kids. Typically, if they're about 16 years of age, for the census, they can be around 14 years of age to answer it. But we want to make sure that we're speaking to a confident person and that the person understands what's happening. So, so we don't get any misinformation or we don't make anyone uncomfortable. And smile. That's a big one. So having a good attitude and personality while you're talking to people really, really goes a long way. And it might even help you, as if you get 1 or 2 grumpy people, keeping a positive attitude to help you keep going and making sure that these communities get counted. These are the areas in which we're looking at. Mario will also share a communities response campaign website. These are the zip codes that we're going to use. He will also share a doc that has all these zip codes on it for you to keep track. This is part of our Communities Respond campaign through Houston in Action, and after the training we did on the 28th. We developed a campaign for Communities Respond where we help people specific undercounted areas. So if you ever want to join one of these areas, you can, but as a phone banker, what you're actually doing is helping gap any holes that we might have seen. By this, I mean that we've been doing weekly calls with different regional areas. So from Southwest to East Side, North, downtown, Pasadena and Edgebrook, Aldine. We're actually doing Cloverleaf and East Harris today, Denver Harbor, Northwest, and Greenspoint. These are all the areas that have the most undercounted populations, and we want to make sure that we do coordinated efforts together with other nonprofits and organizations support these areas. As a phone banker, what you're helping us do, even though we already finished Southwest's coordination week launch week, we're still hosting events with our partners in those areas, but you're also helping us go through all the calls in Southwest. And when we finish Southwest, we'll continue into East Side and the North and downtown until we try to get all the phone numbers that we can called into to give that support. But feel free to look through this website if you want to see all the efforts that we're working on collectively. Through our efforts, when we're trying to, when we view these areas, we're going to start with the 77081 zip code first. This is the Southwest area, and then we'll move into the other areas. And if we need to make a shift, know that Mario will reach out to people to make sure that we're aware, and he'll give more input to that towards the end. But what does this look like might be a question you have. Well, let's start off with an open virtual phone bank. This is what a script typically looks like. I blocked this person's personal information because we don't want information here. But it would actually say their name, their phone number, part of their address, their preferred phone number. And this is a van ID, which is just an identifiable number so we know where it fits in the system. It starts off with a voicemail message, but what I want to focus on is this thing that says, I couldn't reach Ray, which is the person here. So you will click on that, you will click on that, and that'll take you to what kind of responses we're going to give them. And what that actually looks like is when we get started, what an open virtual phone bank looks like. So for the sake of this, I do want to say it's divided between 5 sections, but those sections go to questions 1, 2, then section 3, question 4, and section 5. And that'll make a lot more sense when we review the script together. But the way to get started, and this is because I already have a member ID, it's going to skip the registration portion of it. Mario will link the open virtual phone bank on our chat portion if you want to see what it looks like. But once you press get started, it's going to open up the open virtual phone bank. Now, to me, it's asking me what is the zip code that I'm looking for. But to you, it's going to ask you to make an account first. Now, that account is going to have questions. Please read it and make sure that you're comfortable with what we're doing, because it will have some privacy questions to make sure that what you're doing is confidential, that you're not taking this information. We are very, very protective of our community's identities and information, and we do not want that information to be misused. So read it, please, and take it seriously, so that way you know, like when you make these calls, that you're not intended to keep any of this information. The first zip code we're going to look into is 77081, and then we click begin. Now, for the sake of this training, I'm just going to block the person's information up here. But let's say we wanted to reach this person. Said her name is Maria. Maria could not be she could not be reached. So we put not home, refused, deceased, move, call back, busy, left a message. If you left a message, you can press left a message and then press save and next. But since that's not what we're doing for this, what we're going to do is go through the process for calling them. So if you did leave a voicemail, then you will read off this voicemail. Hi, my name is Oscar. I'm a census volunteer calling with Houton Action. To check if you or your household needs assistance in completing the 2020 census, the census ensures that our communities are properly funded, which means that more funds for schools, roads, healthcare, amongst other resources. If you would like assistance in completing the 2020 census, please call Houton Action Hotline at 281-305-8300. Again, that is 281-305-8300, or you can always fill out at my2020census.gov. Thank you. So that's a voicemail. If they don't pick up, just read the script. I'll be able to get to them. But if they do pick up, again, there's a small introduction right here, and then we go to the very first question. Has someone in your household completed the census questionnaire? So this goes yes, no, and not sure. If it's a not sure, then just take it as a no. Okay, but sorry, if they say not sure, just click not sure, but take it as a no, as in we will go through all the questions. Before we even get to this, or the first question, we want to make sure that we're comfortable to the person we're speaking, because this could also sometimes feel intrusive if we just jump in with, has someone in your household fill the questionnaire? We really want to say hi, introduce yourself. A big thing to say is you're not an employee of the Census Bureau, and then how you're there to support them. Even if you ask them, how's your family? I know that COVID is tough. Being able to just set a small tone really quickly. But you also don't want to take too much time in that space because people are really busy. We just want to make sure that they feel comfortable. So if they said yes, they already completed the census, then it says right here, move to question 4. So you can just go all the way to question 4 right here. But if they said no or not sure, you can click on that. And it says, on question 2, it says skip this question. A resident, if responded, has already completed the census. So if they already filled it out, again, like it says right here, it's just reminding you to skip to question 4, skip this one. But because this person hasn't, would you be interested if I assist you in completing the census? And they can respond yes or no. If they say no, go to question 4. If they say yes, click on yes. And it says, great, I will log into my2020census.gov and fill out the census for you. I will send you a confirmation via email or text once we're finished. Reminder that I am not a volunteer, that I am a volunteer with Houston Action and I am not an employee of the Census Bureau. So this is again a point for you to know that what you're sharing to that person is that you're not a census employee, because we want to make sure that that's clear with everyone we're talking to. And then the next step for you is to go to my2020census.gov and then open up that link. So you will have this script open while you're working on a My2020 Census survey. Questionnaire, sorry. And then that way, once you're done with that questionnaire, you went through all the questions, you come back to this phone banking script. Now you're on question 4. Can we count on you to call or text a friend or family member for the upcoming census and the importance of why it's being counted in 2020 census? So we want to see if they can talk to other friends or family about it. They have an option of saying yes or no. And then we go to section 5. So the section 5 goes to the questions that we were asking the community. All of these are completely optional. Nobody has to respond to this if they don't feel comfortable, if they'd rather not say. That's completely up to them. And the reason we ask these questions is because our goal is to count the most undercounted communities and the people who really need the help. So the first question is, what is your household income? Is it from 0 to 12K, 12 to 25, 25 to 35, 35 to 50, or 50 or over? Again, if they say, I don't want to answer that, then you can skip it. Is any member of your household between 0 to 5? Are anyone in your household a renter? Now, I know some of these questions seem similar to the Census Bureau questions, but they're not. These are questions that we are moving forward, even with our support and in doing our trainings for voter engagement and work, because we know that these are the most vulnerable communities and we want to be able to track that that's who we're helping. So do your home have access to internet? Has anyone in your immediate family been incarcerated? Is anyone in your household living with a disability? Is anyone Asian American, Pacific Islander, African American, Latino, LGBTQ? Again, all these are identifiable markers that help us track like who are we supporting within the community. And then that's it. You go to the thank you. Thank you for participating in 2020 census. I will send you an email or text with your census information. Now, after this closing point, the last 2 questions are for the operator. That means these are for you. For the operator, was the census completed for the caller? So we want to know, did you help this person fill out the census? Was it completed? If that's a yes, click yes. If it's a no, click no. For the operator, did you send a confirmation number or text? This, again, if you sent it out and you want to press yes. If you didn't, you should send it out and then press yes, okay? We do not want any one of these to be no, because no one should be keeping someone else's information. So once you send it out, the last portion I'll cover here is the note section. You have the ability to write in notes and to put something in here. Now, I know that I went through a lot right now, but if I'm honest with you, I've done some of these calls. The longest one I've been on took about 18 minutes. So it can go pretty short. A lot of the times it varies on 2 things: how chatty the person is sometimes and how big the family is. If they have all the information for the family, then they will it'll make it a lot smoother and a lot faster. Typically, dads forget everyone's date of birth. I don't know why, but that does happen a lot. So we get luckier when the moms answer, because they'll tell us all the date of births and put everything together. I don't know if it's a gender thing, but it's there. And then once we're done with this, the next thing to do is click save and next call. And this will automatically generate the next call, same script, and you'll be calling that person to make that to get that count. Now, once you're done, let's say you did it, you like, I have 2 hours to kill right now. I can make these calls. You do it for 2 hours, you're done. You click on stop making calls or log out. This will help us track when you logged in and then when you logged out. So that way we can support with any with tracking of your volunteer. And then if you need that, we can also support with that at the back end. But it's also helped us identify who's making the calls, because it will track based on your login, who's the person who made these calls. So I'm just gonna click log out, and I do not want to save this because I did not get someone's information. So log out, leave session. And it's that simple. Once they're out of the session, you can move on to the next thing you have to do and get on with your life. And we would love to hear from you. So after that, I want to open up to a Q&A in a bit, but I wanted to maybe have a small portion as we do Q&A to maybe understand from y'all like what are our goals and how do we do, like how many calls can we do, what should be a goal. Realistically, how much time can we dedicate to phone banking? That's really going to be up to y'all. So I'm going to pause right here and we can talk a little bit more within the metrics, but I would love to hear more from your thoughts and see if y'all have any questions, because I know I covered a lot.
Oscar,
Okay.
we have some questions.
Okay, I think I read one right here. It says, how do we email or text?
Go ahead, Angela.
Hi. I was just going to say, I typed, what type of things would you want in the notes section, or, what type of things would be in there?
So, for example, let's say any flags that you think are important. So let's say this person got the information, but they hung up and they didn't want, and before I could give them the confirmation, write it in there.
Okay.
Like any flags like that, or if you heard like a compelling story, this person needs assistance with rent or XYZ, maybe there's a way we can connect them with another organization. That's a place to keep notes for that so we can track it.
Okay.
So the question about how do we email or text them, that'll be through either your phone system or an email. And if for any reason you feel uncomfortable, like I don't want to text them something, reach out to Mario or me and we can just send them that information. That's for the confirmation number. So that confirmation number comes out at the end once the survey is filled out. What type of things would you want us in the notes? Any other questions that came out from what we want to cover right now? Because I would like to hear from you, maybe y'all as like, what are your thoughts? Like how many calls are good that we can make? How much time can be dedicated to this? We have canvassers who some dedicate anywhere from 20 to 30 hours a week. But that's the canvassing group who is not able to canvass right now. That's not the same expectation we have for volunteers. We would really like to build something with you together about what your thoughts are on this. Some of the organizers I work with have volunteers that sometimes dedicate anywhere from 5 to 10 hours a week. And we go by our canvassers model, which is that they can make up to 30 calls within an hour. But I also don't want to put that on y'all. I would like to hear from y'all, like what is a realistic thing that you think we can do within an hour, and then how many hours can you dedicate maybe within the week to be doing it? Any thoughts?
This is Arlene. I think I can probably dedicate 10 to 12 hours a week.
Awesome. And how many calls do you think we can set up as a goal, like within an hour?
You know, you keep saying that the people you get on the phone go so quickly. Mm-hmm. Usually, you know, your longest call was 18 minutes. So mm-hmm. I don't know. I figure you, let's see, what was your statistic about how many people you actually reach?
Yeah, so that's a good one. So like a lot of the canvassers, like I said, they've done 30 calls within an hour, but they probably only get anywhere from 3 to 5 people to answer the call. But the attempt was, you know, we attempted 30 calls and we got 5 people to answer. And then it varies based on how much time you spend with them.
Yeah. Well, you know, maybe I could work up to that many calls an hour, but
Well, what if we started at 20? Like, because it's a little lower than what the other calls have been doing. And
that
then,
makes sense to me.
excuse me?
That makes sense.
Yeah, and that way we can say like maybe 20 calls an hour. And again, this is like something we want to reach. If we don't reach it, we can always assess this. Like our goal is to work with y'all on your schedule and your time, and then put something realistic. What I don't want to do is for anyone here to feel like you're not contributing into something, because you are, just by supporting making these calls. But we want to make sure that we have like a measurable, achievable goal. So I'm not like putting something really high that y'all are going to feel really bad at the end. Like it's just impossible to meet. But I also don't want to put something really low that kind of feels like, oh, it's 2 calls an hour, I can do that later. But we really want to see how we can move forward. So if you have, you said anywhere from 10 to 12 hours, maybe 20 hours, 20 calls an hour, that's somewhere around 200 to 240 people within a week. Does that seem okay with y'all?
I think that seems reasonable, and then we'll just, we can see what we can do.
Wonderful. And Mario's taking notes of all of this, so we can keep track of that. And so, from our end, we have something called a community impact story, because we believe that not everything is told via the numbers. So data is extremely important, but not everything that comes in the numbers tell us what's happening. So our community impact story is intended for us to share like experiences, what happened through these calls, and Mario will follow up with you. If any of you choose to share that, that would really help us. So even if it's like, I made 20, like in these 2 hours, I made 80 calls, but I only spoke to one person. But the person I spoke to, she had a family. There's about 9 people who live there. This is the first time they ever filled out the census. Like they felt encouraged and empowered, and I told them that they should register to vote and all this stuff. And no one's ever reached out to them. Trust me, that happens a lot whenever we make these calls. So being able to collect that story for us is important, as we can acknowledge all the work and efforts that y'all are doing, but it also tells about what are the needs that are happening in our community. And
now, is that something you're going to want in the notes or a separate email or?
That's a separate form that we can share out to you, and y'all can fill out it as comfortable as you are, like whenever you feel like this is a good thing to share. Or even if it's the end of the week and you're like, I made all these calls, and if it helps you like think about how it went, that would also be very helpful. It's not a requirement for everyone here. This is also a way for y'all to be able to tell us how you want you to do it. Are there any other questions? Well, so Mario, who's on the call, will be following up with people every Friday. He'll just probably be calling in or checking in to see how you're doing. Our open VPB is open to everyone who can access it and just log into the internet. He has noon to 1 o'clock hours where if you want to call him in, he'll block off that time to talk to people. And then from there, you will also be able to, he'll also be reaching out to you to make sure you have everything you need. Mario, if you want to add your email and your phone number in the chat portion, that would be awesome so people can follow up with you. There was an error for the Google Doc for the zip codes. If you want to add maybe it was that it was not shareable, Mario, you might want to check that. But you can also just add all the zip codes here if you want to copy and paste that in there. So that way people can see it. The first zip code you want to work on is the 77081. So if you want to start off with that one, we can go from there.
Now, I did look up, I did get into it and see the first one that comes up. Are they going to just be in the order that we should be doing them in?
Well, the way it works is that the one you're looking at is not the same person some other caller is looking at. So whenever you call someone and whether they answer or don't and you check them off, that's removed from the deck and it's put somewhere else in the list as already called. So that way no one here is going to have the same list of people and no one's here is going to call the same people twice because they didn't answer.
So you mentioned starting with 77081. So it's already doing that though. We're not looking. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Because you entered a zip code, so it just opened everyone in that zip code.
Well, I actually went into the account we're going to use, and you said not to do anything yet. So I just saw what it comes up, and I saw the address and the name, but that's what we're going to work from.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
I had a question, quick
Yes.
question. In that script, I see that we're saying that I will log into 2020 Gov and fill out. So is that details of how I log in and all that is?
so there isn't really a login into my 2020. Maybe I didn't phrase it right there. But if you go to my 2020, census.gov, sorry, this is, we had done it in Korean for a different person. But once you get in here, it just basically start the questionnaire.
Okay.
So yeah, there isn't a necessary login. I could change the language there. I'm sorry if there was any.
No worries. I think so we just do this, then we come back, jump back into the open voice to finish up the rest of the questions.
Yes, exactly. So you jump out of the script into this, and then you jump back into that.
Okay. Yeah, got it. Thanks.
No problem. So I do want to thank everyone for your time. I know that we're over time right now, but if there's any last thoughts or questions, I'd be more than happy to see how I can answer them.
Mario had a question for the people in the call to see who has an EveryAction ID.
Yeah, and if you don't have one, all you have to do is go into the link that Mario shared for the Open Virtual Phone Bank, and then you can create one there. So some of you might not have one, but it's as simple as just logging into it and creating it. Well,
one last question.
Go ahead.
If somebody else, adult in my family, wants to do some volunteering, can they just sign up on the open voice and then do it?
Yeah, I think they can, but Mario needs to know so we can keep track on who's doing it.
Whoever did it,
So,
yeah.
Yeah, so I would just like let Mario know because even though it's open, like like I said, we want to be really safe with this information. We don't just want like 20 some people opening them. Like we want to keep track on who's using it.
Yeah, got it. Thanks.
Yeah, we haven't had any bad incidents happen to us, but I've heard horror stories from other groups, where somebody else just jumps in who they don't know and is like using all these calls. So we want to avoid that as much as we can. But with your support, we trust y'all. We know that y'all have been really, really excited to work with us, and as we are excited to work with you. So use your best judgment and just let us know who's doing it, and then we'll be more than happy. We could always use more volunteers. So. Okay. Well, thank you all for your time again. I know we're like 8 minutes over time, but this is really, really helpful. I'm super excited. The recording of this will be on our YouTube channel if you want to check it out, Houton in Action, in the YouTube page. And then you can see your lovely faces as you ask questions there as well. So I hope you have a wonderful Tuesday. And then we'll catch up again. Know that Mario will be reaching out to everybody soon. And then thank you again, honestly. Thank you so much. This is a really, really important work. Getting our communities counted means a lot to me personally as a Latino, as a person who's undocumented and supporting our community. I know how important this is and how the impact this does for our community. So,
all right, thank you.
You're muted, sorry.
Bye, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Y'all have a wonderful day.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.